Welcome to a special edition of Backstage with Richard Ridge, where I sit with some of the theater's best and brightest, just chatting it up. SAG Foundation and BroadwayWorld have partnered for a filmed Conversations Q&A series celebrating the vibrant theater community here in New York City and the union actors who aspire to have a career on both stage and screen. This live event, which is coming from the NYIT Auditorium on Broadway, is a conversation with stage, screen, and television star Michael Urie, who's giving a comedic tour de force performance in the hit off-Broadway play Buyer and Seller. Enjoy.
After decades of fame and fortune and unbridled acquisition, Barbara has a lot of stuff. Who doesn't? But Barbara didn't want some run-of-the-mill basement to keep it all in. No, Barbara doesn't like run-of-the-mill anything, although she does in fact run a mill. Page 44. Barbara wanted something special. Let us quote the relevant passage. I had another idea for this space. Why not do a street of shops like I had seen at Winterthur? John had to look it up too. Winterthur is some decorative arts museum in Delaware. We're supposed to know that. In one section of the museum, they recreated all these little stores. A china shop, a country store, just the way they would have looked in the early 1800s. And then they used them to display various collections. Wouldn't it be fun to do something similar? Wouldn't it? So that's what she did. She built a shopping mall in her basement. Remember, this is the part that's real.
So Buyer and Seller is one of the biggest hit shows in town. You have just recouped. Yes. You've just recouped in 9 weeks. That is unheard of.
Yeah, that's what I'm told. Yeah. I guess that's a record in record time for off-Broadway, and I'm we're so happy about that. It's truly shocking that it happened so quickly like that financially. I've never really followed that side of the business, but I'm definitely aware of it now of how that how money works off Broadway, and we made some, and are continuing to, and that's a rare thing. So
I think you should ask for a raise.
I think you're right.
So take me back to the beginning. How did the play come about for you?
Well, the play came about for me. I had met Jonathan Tollins socially, and when I met him, I was already a fan of his. I knew his plays very well, and so when we met, I sort of recited his resume back to him, and he liked that, and we became friends. And then I did some readings of another play of his, and then we both ended up on a TV show together called Partners that you mentioned. He was one of the writers. Thank you. Oh, that was John. Weren't we great, John? Yeah, and so like he was one of the writers and I was one of the actors, and we were both transplanted to Los Angeles, and we got to spend a lot of time together, and we became good friends. And that's when he slipped me Buyer and Seller. And at the time, it was for a different actor. He had written it for a different actor, but he showed it to me as a friend, and he was like, maybe someday you could play this part, and I was like, maybe I could. I liked it very much then, and then that other actor was unable to commit to it, and so John asked me if I would, and it was one of the, if not the fastest incubation period of an off-Broadway play, because he asked me to attach myself. I did, and then within like a day or a few days, the Rattlestick Theater had an opening, and we were in rehearsal within a month, which is crazy. I never even had a reading. It's a completely unheard of thing off Broadway. We got very lucky. The Rattlestick Theater were already huge fans of John's because his play The Last Sunday in June had been a big hit for them. And in fact, the last, that was the, wait, is David Van Asselt right there? Oh, I was going to say he could explain this. Anyway, the last time I think the Rattlestick had a show that transferred to a commercial run was The Last Sunday in June. So John's done very well for the Rattlestick Theater.
Oh, yeah. So for the audience members who don't know, Explain what buyer and seller is, how many characters you play in the show, and what you do.
So it's a one-man show, and it is about the guy. It's a totally fictional story about the guy who works in the very real basement mall at Barbra Streisand's house. And I play the guy who works down there. I play Barbra Streisand. I play James Brolin. I play the woman who runs Barbara's house. And I play the guy's boyfriend, and then a couple of other little characters throughout. And yeah, so the story is completely fake. The guy is completely fake, but the mall is totally real. And so it's basically, it's sort of a fantasia from there of what it would be like to work for her. And yeah, and I play them all, and I'm all of them.
Okay, so let's talk about the challenges of doing something like this. I mean, what were the biggest challenges for you with working on this? Because like you said, you started really fast with this, no readings, right up into a production.
Right, no readings, no workshops. I mean, John's play truly was excellent from day one. So it wasn't like it needed it. It didn't really need to be, honed and rewritten or anything like that. I think it was cut. We cut like 10 pages from the very beginning to now. But that was it. That was all that really needed to happen. It worked really, really well. So it was sort of left up to me to learn it, memorize it, and figure out how to do it. And of course, Stephen Brackett, our amazing director. And so we just went at it. And the challenges were learning it all, obviously, remembering it, and being okay with constant failure. Because working alone, being every second of rehearsal for all of a 4-week rehearsal process means that you're on all the literally all the time. And it's a lot of messing up. And I also, I really threw myself into it in that I never carried a script in rehearsal, so I would call line an embarrassingly large number of times every day. Every day, it was painful and humiliating how many times I'd call line. Sometimes I would shout line. Sometimes, sometimes I would just stop and look down at the floor and gather my thoughts, because it was a very frustrating thing to not have it, not know it, and have to play dialogue scenes with myself.
Maybe you just don't like the way she denigrates Brooklyn. Okay, let me tell you something about Brooklyn. In the first half of the 20th century, that place produced more talent, smarts, and chutzpah than any other place on earth. The mensches that came out of there gave us the best books, the best movies, the best TV shows, the best theater, the best music, the best grandparents, you name it, the best of everything. And yes, Rona Jaffe, who wrote The Best of Everything, was born in Brooklyn. That place, at that time, was a miracle that has not been matched. And certainly not by the Park Slope lesbians who push their double strollers down Union Street. But does Miss S honor Brooklyn as the American cradle of invention, heart, humor, and moxie? No. To her, it is the place she had to escape from as soon as possible so she can make a movie every blue moon and live on a Malibu bluff in a colossal compound with a stranger dressed as Mr. Whipple in her basement.
I want to go back to the beginning. You were born in Dallas and raised, is it Plano?
I was born in Houston, technically, which my relatives always get on me for saying I'm from Dallas. But
You got to change that on Wikipedia then. They've got Dallas on there.
It says I was born in Dallas on Wikipedia?
Born in Dallas.
Oh, okay.
We'll change it to Houston.
Okay, yeah, I was born in Houston, and then I moved to Plano, which is north of Dallas, when I was seven years old.
So where did your love for performing begin, and what were your early creative outlets?
My early, I used to, when we moved, I was in second grade, and it was a while, I didn't really have very many friends, and I would play alone. I would play with my action figures alone a lot. And I would create, and around that same time, I was like 7, 8, 9, I started to really love movies, and I would play out movies with my action figures. I would play out the plots of movies that I'd see with the action figures. So I'd have G.I. Joes and Superman characters and Batman characters, but they would be actors. They wouldn't be, it wouldn't actually be Flint from G.I. Joe. It would be Richard Dreyfuss. Yeah. And I would play out these movies. And sometimes I'd play out movie, I'd make up my own, or I would be playing G.I. Joe, but it would be it would be Richard Dreyfuss as Flint, or whatever. And I think it was Jack Nicholson as Lifeline, which was crazy. He would never accept a role like that. I had no sense for casting, but you know, like I had these actors that I loved, and I had these movies that I loved, and I would play them out. The community college that I went to, the guy who was recruiting me, who said, come to our school, he had a field studies class through the college that was a trip to New York, basically, during the summertime. And I was coming to the community college. I had just graduated from high school, and I was coming to the community college, so I took this field studies class. I'd never been to New York, and there were about maybe like 20 of us. It was a big group, and we stayed at the Milford Plaza on 8th Avenue and saw 13 shows in 10 days.
Wow.
And toured NYU and Juilliard. And when we toured Juilliard, the director, the teacher, pulled me aside and said, after the tour, we were all like, whoa, this is so cool. And, you know, it was a really cool tour, and it seemed like a really great place, and it was just, and it was back. I don't know if you guys remember when there was that plaza over 65th Street, that awesome plaza, which I miss so much. I remember we were standing out there, and he pulled me aside and said, "Are you going to audition for Juilliard? Are you going to audition here?" And I was like, "Yeah, maybe." I was like, "Yeah, very possibly. I think so." And then he goes, "No, are you going to audition?" And I was like, "Yes. Yes, of course." So I did, and I got in. And so it was because of him. I mean, you know, like the tour might have been enough, but he really gave me and I was perfectly happy at that community college. I was planning on staying another year. I was going to stay 2 years. I was going to go, you know, like you do, get my associate's degree or whatever. I mean, I didn't really know, so I left after a year. And thanks to him, thanks to Brad Baker, and that awesome trip. And also, as soon as I stepped foot in New York, I knew that I needed to live here. I was like, oh yeah, this is exactly where I need to be, and this is it. This is home.
Well, you were known to millions of fans as Mark St. James on the hit television series Ugly Betty.
Thank you.
So how did you originally find out about that? Because your agents didn't want you to go in for it, did they?
No. Okay, so I was illegally obtaining the breakdowns. Thank you. Which I think is something everyone should do.
Yes.
Because nobody knows what you can do better than you, and I got a lot of jobs that way. I got a lot of, or at least a lot of appointments for things that I would, call my agent and be like, I heard there's so and so happening, and such and such is getting cast. And this was an example of that. So I did this play called The Revenger's Tragedy in a basement at Culture Project, downstairs at the Culture Project with the Red Bull Theater. And I replaced someone. I had 4 days of rehearsal. It was this big, huge Jacobean tragedy. I was the villain. I had all crazy text, very challenging stuff, and I had to learn it in 4 days, and I almost lost my voice. It was totally psychosomatic. I had this weird, scratchy voice that I've never had since or before, and I was like, I don't know what's wrong with my voice. I'm not gonna be able to do this. And the director was like, are you gonna be okay? And I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. I'll be okay. And the show had already opened and was already kind of a hit. It was like, people loved it. And I got the job and then went to see it. So I auditioned, got the job, and then I went to see it. And it was awesome. And I was so excited and I think terrified. And so one night after the show, once I was in it, I was only in it for like 2 weeks. And after the show, Will Cantler came up to me. He's the casting director at Bernie Telsey. And I had met him in commercial auditions, and so I knew him a little bit. And he came up to me and he said that I was good, and he really liked it, and I could tell he meant it. And so then, cut to like a month later, I'm illegally obtaining the breakdowns, and I see that Will Cantler is casting something, and I'm like, oh, I should look at this closely because he likes me. And I looked through the breakdowns, and it's a television show. And, so there's a lot of roles with really big descriptions, which almost never work for me. And then there are a few roles with very short descriptions. And so I was like, oh, good. Okay, so maybe one of these could be me. And one of them was for a bitchy gay assistant. And what's so funny? No, I'm just kidding. The part that I played in The Revenge of Tragedy was this sort of the take on this villain character. He was a duke, but he was glammed up, and I was wearing like makeup, like kind of like Boy George, and I was very sexual, but also very mean and catty, and it was kind of like it was kind of a bitchy gay guy. I mean, kind of, and so I was like, he saw me do that, and he liked it. I could get an appointment for this, and maybe I could be in it. It was shooting in New York, and I was like, okay, so the year before, 2 years before, I had shot a pilot as a series regular, and this was a co-star. So when I asked my agents about it, I said, "There's this part. There's this casting director. It's in New York. I want to go in for it." They said, "Oh, we don't want you to do a series regular. We don't want you to do a co-star. We only want you to do a series regular." And I was like, "Come on, it's a great part. Who cares?" And it wouldn't, it also wouldn't mean I couldn't do a series regular at some point this pilot season. Why not? Let's just get me in for it. And they were hesitant. And eventually they did get me the appointment. I was cast, but not in time to make the read through. And after the read through, the actress who was playing Wilhelmina was no longer playing Wilhelmina, and they went to Vanessa Williams, who they'd already offered it to, but she passed for some reason. I can't remember why she passed. I think her father had passed away or something like there was some reason why she couldn't do it. And then now when they were asking again, she, things had changed a little bit, and she, it was a better time, and she said yes, and showed up like the next day, and we were suddenly I was injecting her with fake Botox, and so we had never met until the first, our first day of shooting together, and we started chatting in the makeup trailer, and right away she's the coolest person in the world, and like we right away we were getting along, and then she thought I was funny, and she liked what I was doing, and where she was, she was playing a diva. She was playing like, she was, one of the main stars of the pilot, the most famous person certainly in the pilot at the time, and could have very easily not shared any spotlights with this guy playing her assistant at all. But she didn't. She didn't push me away. She noticed I was like sort of mimicking her behind her, and she would be like, "What are you doing? That's funny. Come over here. If you stand right here, you'll be in this shot." Or she'd be like, "What else can I do that you can mimic?" And at one point, she even gave me a line. She was like, "You say this line," and awesome, so cool, very rare, and so I owe her everything.
So when Ugly Betty switched coast for its third season, you came to New York.
Yeah.
And you got down to some very serious stage work, creating the role. Is it Rudy? Is it Gernreich? How you say his last name? Okay. The Austrian emigre and MGM costume designer in John Marin's 2009 docudrama, The Temperamentals. Absolutely brilliant. I mean, I saw it like 6 times.
Whoa, really?
Oh, I saw it at the little theater first, then when you guys moved. What did that role mean to you, both professionally and personally?
Well, professionally, that was something that I had read in John's living room long before Ugly Betty was anything, and it was one, like we do a lot of that as actors. We read a lot of plays with a lot of people that don't necessarily go all the way, and it was pretty exciting to go all the way with a play. I'm sure at some point during those years somebody else did play the part, but like I did early readings, I did a workshop before Ugly Betty, and then I did more readings once it seemed like we might be able to do a production, and then we got to do it in a tiny little theater for 32 people a night. And then we moved to a 99-seat theater for many months. And then we moved to New World Stages and had a proper off-Broadway. So it was one of those great full, you get to just take it the whole way, all the way home. And that was awesome. And personally, it's such an important story of heroism. These guys in the early 1950s were the first political organization for gay people before the word gay even meant gay. And they were radicals, and they were, some of them were communists, and they were doing very, very outrageous. This was almost 20 years before Stonewall even, and nobody knows about them. And so it was a great opportunity to share an important part of our history.
Yeah.
And it was a great part. I mean, he was a wonderful character.
Was he easy to find?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, another great writer. John Marins is a wonderful writer, and he writes very deep characters, and it was very easy to find. And I had lived with him by the time we did the show, I had lived with that character for so long that it felt so much a part of me. Yeah.
Well, you took over the role of Prior Walter from Christian Borle in the recent production of Tony Kushner's Angels in America, for which you were absolutely brilliant in.
Thank you.
What did it mean to you being in that show?
Well, that play was a play that I had been working on for years. I did scenes from it in Forensics, which I also did. That's how I first knew. Did I say that earlier? That's how I first knew John Toland's plays was from Forensics. I did scenes from his play Twilight of the Golds in Forensics, and I also did scenes from Angels in America in Forensics, and then at Juilliard I did scenes from Angels in America, and one of my league scenes was from. So it was one of the, and I auditioned for it initially, and I didn't get it, and I was very excited about maybe getting to do it, and of course disappointed when I didn't get it. But then, when it came around later, and Christian left, when he left the production, and there was still a few months left in the run, and I got to go in and do it, and I got to work with Michael Greif a lot on it. It was very special. It was a really, really good production, and that play is so good. And playing that role, especially, I think there are some characters in that play that can be a painful experience. I know that, like having to, sob and lose everyone. It's not easy if you're playing Joe, and being completely batshit crazy isn't easy if you're playing Harper, and having to be, but being able to play Prior, and he of course gets sick, and that's very challenging, and you have a lot of pain and misery with that. But at the end, you get to go talk to angels, and you get to bless everyone, and he's such a light, and so to get to play a light like that every night was so one. And I didn't want that show to end, and I loved every second of it. It was so moving and inspiring, and in that tiny little theater, it was so special.
Well, in recent years, you have always been very upfront about your sexuality and your personal life with your partner Ryan. Was that a difficult decision to make?
Ultimately, no. It was when Ugly Betty first came on, it was a more complicated. I had no idea what being in the public eye was going to be like,
Yeah.
Or how long it would last. That was another thing. I had no idea, how long, this show could last 6 episodes, and then no one will ever see me again. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to say, and also that was before any of these other guys had come out. So it was like there was no real mold yet for how you do something like that. But then ultimately, when I did, it was very easy. The hard thing, more than like actually coming out, the hard thing was being faced with whether or not to play gay characters all the time or not, or to say no to them, because there was definitely there was a consensus among my team after Ugly Betty that I shouldn't do another gay character, which I at first was like, yeah, you're right. But then I realized that's gonna be boring and very challenging to not, for me to like, I'm not gonna work. Basically, I was like, I'm not gonna work if I don't do that. So, and these great parts kept coming out. How do we say no to Angels in America? You can't say no to that just because it's a gay part. That's crazy. And I've gotten to play a lot of very different gay parts because of that. So I think that was a harder thing to do, to like face every time that gay part would come up, stop and think, should I take another or should I not? And once I let go of that, it was a lot easier to just and I've gotten great parts.
Oh yeah.
Really great parts.
In January of 2012, you made your Broadway debut as Bud Frump alongside Nick Jonas in How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. Was that a dream come true?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's Nick Jonas's birthday.
Yeah.
He's
Oh, today?
21. Yeah.
I love him. I
Yeah.
thought he was terrific. And I'm a huge Daniel Radcliffe fan. I
Yeah.
thought you guys were terrific. And you went in together in the show.
We did. We got to rehearse
Yeah.
together. We had about a month of rehearsal, or maybe like 3 weeks of rehearsal together, which was really great. Just the two of us.
Yeah.
And an amazing dance captain and a stage manager and associate director. And Rob Ashford came a lot also. I'd never done a musical since. Actually, the last musical I had done was Gypsy in community college.
Who'd you play?
Ironically, I played Bougeron Cochon, who's the photographer that takes Gypsy Rose Lee's picture at the end. And
I was like, what show is this? There was.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, there's a little guy. I had one word, enchanté. That's all I said. And I also understudied Tulsa and Mazeppa. One guy played both. One guy played Tulsa and Mazeppa. So it was a little bit like, oh, so Tulsa runs away with June and becomes a drag queen.
Was this an all-boys production?
No, just that one. Just that part. It was great. He was really good too. He was like, he could dance like crazy,
Yeah.
so he was a great Tulsa, and he was a very funny drag queen. And
Did you ever get to go on as Mazeppa?
no, I didn't go on as well. We only did it for 2 weeks. It was college, but so I never went on. But it's a good thing I didn't go on because I didn't really know the dance. Honestly, it would have been a nightmare. But I had not done a musical since then.
Yeah.
And hadn't even really auditioned for it. But I weaseled my way into that show.
Illegally downloading.
I
casting?
illegally downloaded. No, I heard that they were doing a reading with Daniel Radcliffe, and I had met Neil. Actually, I had met Neil Marin and Craig Zaden, the producers, at a function a few years earlier. And in fact, while I was so ballsy. When I was talking with them at this thing, I was like, you guys should do a movie musical of how to succeed in business without really trying. Now, I'm not saying I gave them the idea, but a few years later, now they're producing How to Succeed on Broadway. So I was like, okay, I got to get myself in for this. So I weaseled my way in. I got an audition for the reading, and I got the reading, and it was Daniel Radcliffe and David Hyde Pierce played
John Larroquette. Yeah.
John Larroquette part, and Mary Faber, who ended up going on and playing Smitty, and Rose Hemingway, who ended up playing Rosemary, and a few other great, awesome people. And they wanted me to do it. The producers wanted me, and for a while it was me. And then I ended up having to audition again for estate people, and I lost it.
Really?
I lost the job. Yeah, very sad. That's a long, very sad story that I don't want to say on camera. But I got it anyway. I got to do it anyway. And it actually worked out so amazingly because I found I wouldn't have been able to do Angels in America if I'd been in How to Succeed from the beginning. So it worked out very, very well. I got to do Angels in America and then a couple of other things. And I got to do Angels America and then direct our movie and do The Cherry Orchard, and then got the call, are you sitting down? They want you to replace in How to Succeed. And so I got to go do it. And I had seen, the reason I knew I needed to weasel my way in was because I had seen it when I was 16 with Ralph Macchio. And Roger Bart played Bud Frump. And it was incredible. And they were both brilliant. And I was like, that's a musical I could be in. I could do that. I could play one of those parts. And so it was awesome. And I had a really good time with Nick Jonas and Beau Bridges, who took over for John Larroquette, and we had it was pure joy doing a Broadway musical. It was the most fun you can possibly have, I think, in show business. It's just like you're singing and dancing, and people are cheering. I mean, it's probably not as much fun to do like Les Mis or Phantom, but like doing How to Succeed was so fun. And when I joined the show, it had been running for like 9 months already, and there were people who'd been in it in the show the whole time, and they were still humming the tunes backstage, and still trying new things, and still like. And you know, like they loved that Nick and Beau and I were all in it now, and it was like this fresh blood, new energy, and it was awesome.
You worked on the short-lived comedy Partners on CBS. Partners fans? I loved that little show.
Thank you. I did too. It was a really fun show. We had a wonderful time doing it. We had 6.5 million viewers,
Yeah.
Which is a lot, right? Well, no.
But it is,
Apparently
though.
not.
If you had been on like a cable network, that would have been huge.
Yeah.
If AMC had picked you up or
If we had
somebody.
been on any other network.
TV
Any
Land?
It's NBC.
Yeah.
Any other network, we would have been a giant hit with those kinds of numbers. But CBS is a pretty they've got a juggernaut.
They cut and slice quickly.
Yeah.
But you love doing it, right?
Loved doing it. It was a multi-camera show with an audience, and so it was really, really fun to do a play every week, and it was cool. You know, like it was the best of both worlds for me because there was an audience, and it was you know that sort of scope and of television is very exciting, and the immediacy of television that you get to work with writers, and they're constantly rewriting, and especially with that show, they were constantly rewriting on the set, on stage, with the audience there. They would give us new lines, new jokes. It was so thrilling. And then it would be on TV in a week or two.
What's the best bit of advice that you were given that you still live by?
Well, a casting director, really nice guy, named John. Oh no, I forgot his name. That'll come to me. He works at Warner Brothers in LA now, but he used to work out here for Warner Brothers. And he gave me a really wonderful piece of advice that was, I said something like, I don't want to be typecast. And he said, you know, in television, you have to get typecast before you get cast. And I was like, really? Oh, okay. Then I want to be typecast. And it's true. And I think so. I think like there's a fear of being typecast, but there's also like you want to break in, and sometimes to break in you have to get typecast first. I think that's true. I mean, I think once people knew who I was, there were a lot more things and not just because people knew who I was, were things coming my way, but people had a better idea of what they could do with me. I think getting sort of typecast, and I don't mean getting typecast as the bitchy gay assistant, although bitchy gay assistant roles did come my way. I mean like getting typecast as somebody who does physical comedy, or somebody who, somebody who will play gay characters, or somebody who is tall, or whatever. Like you just end up being, something that people can go to. Can go to you for something that you can a need that you fill, and to say I don't want to get typecast I think can be damaging because that's what they do. I mean, that's what casting people do. They do put you in categories. And if you watch television, you know that there are only a few types of characters on most television.
I want to thank you so much for doing this.
Thank
This was
you.
a really special evening for me.
For me too.
And,
Thank you.